You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
All right, everybody. So today on the Devil Dog Talk Show, we got a pretty interesting conversation. We have JR with us today to discuss a few things about what happened. And unless you're living underneath a rock, let me just tell you what, brother, things are getting pretty hairy outside. In retrospect, let's say it's probably as hairy as it's going to get. But we wanted to discuss a few things about what's occurred within the attempted assassination on Donald J. Trump. There's a lot of hearsay. There's a lot of chaos up in the air right now. It's getting hyper politicized right now. Things are coming out of the woodworks. Very interesting. Before I hopped on, I want to, definitely call some people out, including some people that I used to, really be fond of, which is Tenacious D. They shot a video during a concert saying after Jack Black gave a cake to Kyle Gass and he said, "Blow out your candles and make a wish." And Kyle says, "Don't miss Trump next time." It's a pretty interesting time when we're living in a country, where something literally just happened on Saturday and people like the left and the right, they're getting so ramped up, but we don't even know the details yet. So that's what we wanted to discuss, is not get so emotional, not get too into the woodworks, not go down too many rabbit holes, but to ask from the horse's mouth, if this was a situation like this in this setting, how did this even happen? So I made some phone calls, some great buddies of mine. One of my good brothers, he followed through and sent me JR's number, and we're going to be talking to you from the perspective of his, and I'm going to introduce him, or I should say, allow him to introduce himself and give a bit of history. So how are you doing, JR?
I'm doing well, Joey. Thanks for the phone call. And, like I said, I'm happy to share my experiences and kind of my limited expertise on something like this. Obviously, I'm not, the subject matter expert when it comes to the Secret Service or anything like that, but I do have some time behind a rifle. And, as far as precision shooting goes, I can definitely talk from that perspective.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I think I have another buddy of mine. I was looking at his stuff, and he's actually, I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to put him on blast, but I think he's working on the detail right now, and he's pretty motivated. And he was posting that the A-team's coming out. But this is an enjoyable conversation because I don't think that the person, I use the word gentleman, who took the shot was necessarily an expert. After me and you had a little conversation, I was flabbergasted, that's the word I've been using all weekend, on just the parameters of variation, because there's one thing that we should talk about. One, what type of rifle systems are you aware of, and what is the working history? Because you mentioned time behind a rifle. What is your experience on that?
So, I joined the Marine Corps in 2000 and immediately was indoctrinated into the, I got to take the indoc into the Marine Corps Scout Sniper program, which I graduated. And then I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps as a Marine Sniper and did some instruction and stuff like that. I also did a little bit of time with the Marine Corps Rifle Team as well. And so very familiar with the ins and outs of precision rifles, even, as far as the AR-15 platform, which, as you know, is one of the rifles that they use in the Marine Corps Rifle Team for national matches and different things like that. I mean, it's considered the standard for national matches. So, it's interesting when we look at, the whole attempt, or, I guess the shot placement when we're trying to get all this information, because there's a lot of people out there immediately after this was going down that were, is this something that could have been staged? Is this something that, was this a real attempt? And there was a lot of misinformation that's been going around. And it's hard to kind of distinguish, especially because we don't have all the facts just yet, especially just the rifle that was used. Because from what we know, it has been released that it was an AR-15 style rifle, but there's so many variations of that rifle that could be in play.
Exactly.
Especially because, now we've also heard that he was, he tried out for the school shooting team, but didn't make it. So is this a rifle that his father bought? Because we do know that it was purchased legally by his dad, you know. So is this a rifle that his father bought that was maybe a national match grade rifle, which would make it a little bit more accurate than your everyday off the shelf AR-15, you know? And that comes into play. Like, how close was this actual shot?
Exactly. There's so many things going around, and I love that how you brought that up, that we don't really have confirmation on the exact round. We don't have the exact rifle. Of course, there's photos of the individual, and there's a lot of chaos on confirming the identity. The authorities have confirmed his identity, just so we're all clear. Okay, there was a lot of, this or that, and who's who, and was he featured on a commercial with BlackRock, and all these already eager connecting the dots, right? And I'm all for it. I'm all for, people trying to get the truth out. But we got to take the steps, step by step, like you're explaining. Let's confirm some basic information, what type of rifle it was. It did look, you can see the stock on one of the photos actually as he's getting into position. And there are graphs coming out of the exact distance, angles, and all of that current stuff. And in fact, there was a recent politician, let me pull that up really quickly, that just made an announcement on the investigation that there isn't anything confirmed necessarily on what or who or who. That's not the one. That's not the one. Okay, let me pull it up one more time, fella. Here we are.
Well, no, I mean, there's just so many. There's so many things out there right now. It's hard to keep everything in track, especially in today's where everybody wants to be first, right? Whether it's the right information or not, they are just, if they have even a morsel or a crumb of information that has not been verified, they want to be first, whether it's wrong, because later on they can correct whatever it is, but they're looking for the clicks now. They want the engagement. They want the media frenzy to continue.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so eager to get these questions with you out. The gentleman that I was trying to comment on is Jeff Jackson, very level-headed gentleman, and really kind of like his approach towards, hey, this is what occurred, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. Now let's get into the weeds, but with your experience on this, because the distances that we're talking about are relatively close, and not to get into the security element, because there are a multitude of elements of security that go within Secret Service and protecting a high how would we say this? A very important person, VIP, right? And how they
protect, obviously the protectee is what they would refer to them as, or whatever code name they use for, former President Trump. But, from my experience, from who I've talked to, especially with my, my background, I actually deal with law enforcement and firefighters almost on a daily basis. And I have a lot of friends within the federal government, in the federal law enforcement agencies. So I've reached out and I've talked to a couple of them. And for the most part, the site, if it's not a building, if it's held on open ground, similar to what we saw, you're looking at about 100 yards where it's the hard cordon, right? That's basically the Secret Service has that sealed off. And from what we can tell, this building was in basically the soft area or the secondary perimeter. So about 150 yards out is what we're looking at. Some people saying anywhere between 400 to 500 feet. And, at that distance, that's a relatively easy shot. So, I mean, you already have everyone from members of Congress to law enforcement officials, everyone kind of asking, how did this happen? Because most of the time those buildings are locked down. They are secured days prior to even the rally taking place. You have an advanced team from the Secret Service that comes in and does their initial assessment. And then they basically, they do background checks on everybody who works in those buildings, everything like that. They kind of close everything down 24 hours prior. They're usually there making sure there's nobody in the buildings, nobody available to get into those buildings, especially anywhere with a clear line of sight to the president or the former president.
Right. And that's something that's coming out very, very much in the eyes of just anybody. I think there's a documentary that came out just a few years ago on the Secret Service, and they go through a lot of these different elements of preparation and double checking, triple checking, vehicles, ambulances. There's a whole just a massive movement of logistics and security. And to see, what we're seeing, yeah, it's completely gut flipping. I was telling you yesterday when we were talking a bit, it makes my nerves go up and down. It makes my stomach flip. And I go, because there's none of this makes rational sense. Just in any aspect.
We have to kind of take a step back. You're going to have to take a step back, because this isn't the acting, the official president. It is it is the former president, but he's, this is a campaign trail. Mm-hmm. So not all of the assets and security measures available to the president were available at this point in time. And, that's understandable, right? You imagine having to cover every person on the campaign trail and what that would look like, just dollars wise. So they do the best they can with what assets they have.
What's available.
Exactly. And okay. I think a lot of that relied on, the local law enforcement that was tasked out there as well. And that always happens. They always have at least a joint task force with the local law enforcement and, just basic, security for those outer cordons where they're not able to basically use the manpower that they have available to them.
Exactly. So, okay. Now, see, that makes a lot more sense, because in my ignorance, right, I'm always thinking that we do the most. And I don't know why. I mean, that's a naive, I guess, optimistic, hopeful, person in me. But realistically, I get it. That makes a lot more sense. Like it takes 45 minutes for police to show up in certain areas of the world, like where I live, right? Or even the ambulance takes a while. That makes a lot more sense, because I didn't think about that. Like, no, he is the previous president and he is on the campaign trail, but we're not going to use every single asset that we have available for that. I guess that's my ignorance, and I'm probably sure there's a lot of us that are not in that world probably thought the same thing. So the next question is for you on at least the rifle aspect, right? Let's say it is the AR platform. Let's say it's the more common AR, or the 223 or the 5.56 variation, whatever it is. In that platform, what type of accuracy are we looking at and for, depending on what type of sights he's using? I know this is a bit of a, a little bit of a long shot, but I'm just very intrigued by, because this is the concept my wife brought up. What if this was staged, right? And Trump's behind it to get the votes and to swing the motivation in his direction. And my opinion was, I don't think Donald Trump is that confident in anyone else but himself that much, okay? Like, to be that risky of a shot, I don't see that being a staged occurrence where he's involved. Maybe other people, sure, that's what a lot of people are running down right now. But just the shot, in your experience and expertise, how hard and difficult would that be to pull off in both variances where, hey, he's in on it and he knows the cue and he's turning exactly at the right moment? Just at that distance, what type of variations are we talking about?
Well, even at that distance, like I said, within, the estimation is about 150 yards or, 400 to 500 feet in that area. But you're looking at, your average AR-15 where, not knowing anything about the rifle, if it was accurized, if they changed out barrels, if it was, anything like that, not even taking into account the type of sights that were used. Do we know if it had an optic? Do we know if it was iron sights or anything like that? But just the rifle platform in itself, you're looking at a standard accuracy of about 1.5 to 3 MOA, or what we call, what we refer to as 1.5 to 3 inches at 100 yards. Basically that being said, it would be able to group 3 to 5 rounds within a 1.5 to 3 inch circle at that distance. Now, when you're talking about 150 yards, now you got to add a little bit more to that, right? So say the rifle does hold, about 1.5, at about 150 yards, you're looking at almost 2-inch circle. So when you look at your own ear, to be able to hit just, that little piece of the top of the ear, almost incredible, that shot.
It's see, that's the thing. And we did a live yesterday, and a lot of participation was, I love the questions. I love it when people participate. One of them was, what's the likelihood of intervention, right? Divine intervention and all that stuff. And, I'm for it. I'm for the faithfulness and whatnot, because what you just explained, okay, for the listeners, let's break this down. The likelihood of being that precise at that angle, at that distance, with that person, with that rifle platform, it's inconceivable.
And that's taking everything out of the equation as far as, variables from movement of the target, because he was standing, he was moving, he turned his head, and then you have wind also to take account. Now, most people at 100 yards don't think, wind's really a factor, but with that fast of a bullet and that light of a bullet, even a 5-mile-an-hour wind at that distance is going to push the bullet anywhere, between, I'd say 0.4 to 0.6 inches in the direction of the wind. So about a half an inch approximately.
Holy shit. See, so okay. And again, my background is being a corpsman. I fix the things that bullets do, right? And I'm looking at it from this perspective. I play video games. I think everybody's played a video game, and you're like ripping away, and you get these amazing shots, like even on Red Dead Redemption, okay? And it's literally such a lucky occurrence that that's all the damage that occurred was with a little, you said it, piece of the ear. Mike Tyson's his ass, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, here's a little thing to kind of put it in perspective, right? If you've for the listeners, if they've got a pencil or a pen in their hand that they can grab, I mean, put it up to your ear and now just turn your head. And when it touches the back of your skull, that's how much movement it would have taken, just centimeters for that round to enter the back of the cranium.
Yeah.
And, those bullets do weird things when they enter and hit hard bone and flesh. They can bounce around, they can do different things. So, for somebody to say that this was staged, I mean, I wouldn't trust myself to take that shot. And I'm really, really good. And that's with one of the most accurate rifles that I own, which is actually a bolt action rifle. So.
See, and that's a great point you bring up, right? So I want to take this from the perspective of, I've never shot before. I don't know the difference between an AR platform or a bolt action. None of this stuff makes sense to me, right? Let's pretend for a moment. And let's take it from that point. So we're talking about such a variation of precision just between platforms that you yourself wouldn't be confident in taking. And we're an instructor, and you went through the sniper school, and you were on the shooting team. You were in the Marine Corps. Some of the best shooters, I'm not going to lie, some of the best shooters the world has ever seen. That's not just hearsay or bullshit. That's not fluff. Okay.
We like to think so, but when
one of the criteria to get in your bull was a hog tooth or whatever it is, right? It's pretty fucking crazy to put that into perspective.
But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the differences between the rifle platforms, I mean, the less moving parts you have in a firing system or a rifle platform, the more accurate you can make that system. So with a bolt action rifle, you load one round with the bolt, you close the bolt, it locks the round into place. And then when you fire, nothing moves, right? Your bolt doesn't cycle or anything like that. Where with the AR platform, you have multiple functioning parts where the bolt locks up, you fire, it unlocks, it cycles to the rear. There's movement in the system, and so it's not as accurate as a bolt action rifle.
Okay, I see. Now, with that, right, what are we talking about here? We're still talking about the caliber because somebody was like, oh, it looked like it was barely a 22. There's a lot of minimization here, okay? Like, so much.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, like, again, my optimistic, naive heart was like, this is going to unify the country. And then I've seen some posts and I'm like, yeesh.
The calibers are similar when you look at it from the number point, right? You have a 22 versus a 223. They're very, very similar in size, but then you look at the rounds themselves and they're completely different, right? Where the 22 is considered, a small caliber, the 223 it's a high-powered rifle round. So, I mean, it's not a 300 Win Mag, which, from what I've heard and everything like that, is what was used to kind of neutralize the target or the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, it can do a lot of damage. It's one of the reasons why, it's been so used and so popular in the military.
Yeah, you bring that up, and I've seen physically up front and close and personal what the 223, the 7.62. I'm sorry, I should say the 5.56 NATO and the 7.62. What that round is developed to do, and the ballistics behind it. The temporary cavity, permanent cavity. The pressure wave, the energy behind that round getting next to flesh does damage, and this made contact, right? And so when you're bringing that up, like the high pressures and the speeds, the lethality, I believe they say is in the foot per seconds or whatever it is. And you have the mass equates to force, and that impact force is what creates the lethality. I've seen it where rounds go in and out of people. I've seen it where there are a larger round moving slower, tumbling twice before it exits. But these are rounds that have hit solid and smacked perfectly, right? This round, you can see it, people. They have photographs of it whizzing past through his ear, I should say, at this point, right? Literally long distance ear piercing, which is not recommended. And that's
they don't know.
Theory.
Well, here's the thing: they don't know if that was the first round, because you do hear two rounds. The first round goes off, and then the second round is kind of when he reaches up and touches his ears. So they don't know if that's actually the photo of the first round or the second round that actually is the one that pierced the ear.
The long distance piercing there. Yeah.
Yeah, but there were, there was a number of shots. There, some say 6, some say 8. It's hard to determine, especially because we don't know which one of those reports were the counter snipers actually engaging the target. So it's kind of hard to determine from the video where you're not seeing the actual counter sniper team take the shot. You're just hearing the sounds of which ones were incoming and which ones were outgoing.
And given that perspective, I think it'd be so difficult to tell what's what regardless. We'd have to see and wait. See, this is the reason why I get so excited about this space, right? There was a research paper I worked on when I was in audio engineering school many moons ago, about 2013, 14. There's a device, okay, and it's like shot radar, so to speak, right? Where if there's any fired rounds, and I think they even had it in the military for certain things, it will get within, a certain parameter of precision of where that round came from, and maybe even identify the type of round or firearm being used. I can't really remember the paper, but loosely, right? This is 2024, right? Yeah. So that's 10 years later-ish. I'm pretty sure the technology had to be available, and I'm pretty sure hopefully it comes out, because just with microphones, you can get pretty good with, figuring things out. But going back to the shots, right, and hearing them, and a lot of the bigger question is, okay, the security team there are reports, quote unquote, direct reports from, people there saying that they were screaming and shouting and pointing at the person coming into their position of firing, right? And
I mean, there's actual video footage now. They have video footage that's been leaked, or posted on image, and they're like they're like, hey, look, there's somebody crawling on that roof, and he is crawling. And now there's, the Associated Press actually reported that there was a law enforcement official who climbed up the same route, saw the individual, who pointed a rifle at the law enforcement officer, but because he was climbing, he couldn't reach his firearm, so he dropped back down because he didn't want to get shot.
And that's a smart move. I wouldn't
Right?
want to get shot.
I mean, I don't know how much stock I put into that. You know, it's kind of like, okay, well, how was he able to then still get off 8 rounds after all of that stuff? I don't know. I don't know the whole situation. So, but from what I've read and from what the Associated Press was actually reporting, that actually happened. There was a law enforcement officer who looked up onto the, climbed up, saw him, was then, basically had the rifle pointed at him. So he dropped back down because he couldn't engage. And at that point, why are you not utilizing your radio, calling everyone, telling everybody what's going on, or at least, trying to engage the subject from another angle? So.
Right. And that just brings up more and more questions, right? If you're looking at a couple of good videos, I could pull them up, but you're not going to be able to see them, people. The interesting thing on one of the angles, and this is one of the best angles, is you can see 2 sniper teams. There's one in the upper left area and one in the lower right area. And what I found really interesting was you can hear the shots being fired, and it looked as though clearly they felt as though it was effective fire because you can see heads ducking immediately. And I'm like, oh shit, like, was this an individual? In sniper teams from even video games, you call out multiple shots before you engage in a single target. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really I didn't know. Well, what's going on here and there. But I think that you could actually see the shots carrying out, the sniper team react, and then one of them picks up his rifle. But I have not been able to confirm who actually took what shot from what position to put him down.
We don't know if it was the sniper on the furthest sniper away from, in the photo where you have the 2 snipers that were up behind the president as he was speaking. You don't know if it was the one in the prone position who's farther away or the one closer to us who was in the kneeling position, had his rifle up on a tripod. I would assume, in my perspective and what I can determine, I would assume it was the gentleman who was in the kneeling position because he had a little bit elevated position. And from what I can tell of the roof that the shooter was on, it was sloped away. So basically, only the upper half of his body and the rifle would have been visible at that distance. And it's really hard when you're scanning multiple sectors to fixate or lock onto that one little thing that looks out of place.
Yeah, that's something that I'd love to bring up next. Okay, because we brought up Carlos Hathcock. No, Hitchcock. I can't remember the last name. Hathcock. Right, the white
completely different time frame, but yeah,
and, just completely different stuff going on. We were talking a bunch of different things, but my point was, because you brought up that you're scanning and it's really difficult to see a dot at 150 yards, right? That would be, it'd probably be smaller than the tip of my pinky, just fully extended out and going from one range to the next or one sector to the next. And the reason why I bring them up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you also have to take into account, if they are under the impression that those buildings are secured, especially by local law enforcement, and that they've been cleared and everything like that, those guys who have those long distance optics and the rifles capable of reaching out past that distance are probably fixated beyond that area. Right? They're probably scanning the area beyond the crowd, beyond those buildings for any threats.
I see what you're saying.
So they may not have been focused directly on that building, thinking, hey, we've got people in place out there that should be doing their job. So, it's not necessarily a failure on them that they didn't find it in time.
See, and that's beautiful that you bring it up, because it was the same thing that I was going towards with the Carlos Hathcock thing, where everybody has a job to do, right? And we're not out there. This isn't a situation where, it's in the jungle in Vietnam where people are hidden and, and there's all of this foliage and all this, counter and whatever. Because honestly, let's think about it. Isn't he wearing the perfect thing to blend in? a t-shirt and
I mean,
cargo
yeah, when
shorts.
you
you know,
well, when you look at it, you look at the average individual at that crowd, he would have blended in just fine had it not been for a rifle and him crawling on top of a building.
and that's the point I think a lot of people have to make is what was the delay? And I think you nailed it right on the head is when you're anything operates outside of the window of daily operations standard SOP, it creates these gaps, okay? And I think that's something that a lot of people are discussing. Dan Bongino, that's not, I think it's Bongino's his name, prior Secret Service, right? He was discussing this very thing where the gaps in security just happen to align in such a manner. And I'm going and throwing some complacency in there. It's a bit soft, like you're saying, this area of defense or this tactic or this way or this method. There's been an increase in this campaign, just thoroughly, of shit going crazy and haywire. RFK Jr. has had a couple attempts, possibly on his life, I would say, where a gentleman's using false credentials and dressing up and blending in. And I didn't know how heavily armed he was until I saw the ad for his Secret Service detail petition, where he had like a whole bag of shit. And I was like, oh God, what a complete failure on the security, but also good that they caught him, right? But this one slipped by.
And I mean, you touched on it earlier when you were talking about, Tenacious D and what, they mentioned at their concert. It's unheard of for the rhetoric that's been coming out lately. They're literally okaying the political violence on both sides of the aisle. I'm not saying it's one side or the other. It's just people are almost desensitized to the point where they're like, yeah, they should have, wish they would have hit him. Don't miss. All
Thank
this
you.
stuff is coming out. And it's like, that isn't, necessarily in my mind, what makes that okay? You're calling for violence on somebody who, has done nothing to you personally, I guess. But I don't know. It's just the way I feel about it. The climate, the temperature, as they say, has been so high that I feel like this is just pushing it even higher.
I completely agree. That's actually something I've been talking to my wife about. Because here's the thing is I pay attention to this stuff a lot. I know that these politics things are a lot more important than people give weight to. Simply being a veteran, I understand how policy and legislation really affects the day-to-day living of our existence. Yes, on a local level primarily, right? So being involved is super important. However, being completely radicalized in this sense on what you brought up is exactly the same way I feel. Both the left and right have borne a huge responsibility to this temperature and pressure point that we're at right now. And that's just my personal observation, right? I honestly feel, though, that in order to break through that echo chamber and the loudness of what's going on in the left and what's going on in the right, I have to go ahead and take a deep breath, take a step back. That's why I like what you said, take a step back. This was a former president. Okay, not the president. That makes more sense. Take a step back. And that's what I tell my wife is like, taking a little bit of a breath and looking at the weight of the situation. I really hope it's utilized by the leaderships, and I use that word loosely, the people that have, several million followers, that they understand the weight of their words that come out of their mouth, and they understand the influence that they are really kind of giving way to, right? This is a huge event. And the way I compare it is not to 9/11. It's not the same. It's not to January 6th. It's not the same. It's not the same as COVID. However, the results and the infliction and impact of what this may be and may cause is something where everybody is responsible and obligated to chime in and say, hey, let's figure it the fuck out, because I'm not about to have a civil war like people have been hitting for a while now, because 42% of those who vote out of the 100% of the population, okay? And out of that population of each is between your left and righters. And in that population, you have your absolute radicals, the purple-haired weirdos, you know who I'm talking about. And you have the others that are super duper radicalized over here on the right with the hoods. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I go, okay, I'm not about to boil this shit down to the fucking white meat simply because those two groups are having a fucking a bad day, okay? Like, this is the United States of America, not
but the temperature,
the left or right.
See, but the temperature that we've created with all of the rhetoric that's been said on both sides of the aisle, it really is kind of that, perfect tinder pile that's just waiting for a spark. And, a couple of centimeters, 1 to 2 centimeters difference in that shot could have ignited everything. I mean, look at just the psychology of the mob mentality, right?
Oh my
You get
God,
a large group of people together, and all it takes is 1 to 2 individuals to start a complete riot because that mob mentality takes over. So you get, even if you don't have that many people who are radicalized right or radicalized left, but, now there's, say it did go the other way and there was an assassination. And now you have those people on the right who are the far right radicals just causing trouble. And it basically snowballs into an effect that could possibly have ended up in an all-out war.
Exactly. And I feel as though it's very hard to come from the perspective that you're coming from, that you understand the delicateness and precision behind the near miss or near hit, whatever we call it, right? It's something that's, again, I think, taken away due to, like you said it, the numbness. You said it better a minute ago, where you become numb to everything because desensitized. Thank you so much. Right, that it's something where nobody takes action from. That it would have took the actual brains of his to be poured out, right? But that did happen. A gentleman did pass away, Corey Caporatori. I'm slaughtering that name, but we all know him. He was the fire chief guy, the firefighter that was protecting his kids, and he got injured.
Let's just call it what it is. I mean, he's a hero.
Exactly.
Out of everyone there that day, people can refer to the counter snipers that were doing their job. But in my eyes, that's like when people refer to me when I was overseas and making shots and saving lives and stuff like that, they say, you're a hero. But in reality, I was doing what I was trained to do. I was doing my job. Now, Corey, on the other hand, he was at a rally with his family and he threw himself on top of his wife and kids. That wasn't his job. That's his job as a father, but he wasn't expecting that. He wasn't there to take incoming fire or do anything. So, in my eyes, he's the real hero.
Exactly. And we should take a name. I'm going to take a minute to get the name completely right. It's Corey Comparatori. And I'm going to go ahead and spell it for everybody. Corey Comperatori. Some of the reports are coming out, that he was a father, I think, of 3. I could be wrong. That is my bad. I would get that correct next time. But yes, you're exactly right. He jumped into action where many would have flinched and ducked. And not to be critical of the Secret Service, but we saw those pictures, okay, guys? And some people were doing that. And I'm like, yeah, that's called when shit hits the fan, right? Mike Tyson said it best. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the fucking face, right? And
oh yeah, absolutely.
It's the truth. I can tell you this. You can be the best trauma doctor in the world, all right? And you don't put the finger on the blood that is bleeding and pulsing and bright, okay? Because you're reacting to the hot mess that's splashing in your face, seeing it happen, okay? But there were people that were engaged in attempting first aid. Then you have this gentleman that leapt in to protect his family. And it's something that, we can't say loud enough. People are saying, no, at least Donald Trump didn't die. And I go, that's really kind of insignificant that Donald Trump didn't die. The significance of the event in its totality, including the fact that this gentleman passed away, others were injured, including Donald Trump, okay? The fact that this occurred is all the signs of a dumpster fire, okay? Like, I don't know how to say it louder or kinder. I was explaining to my wife the same thing. She comes from Mexico, where, yeah, everybody's like, well, Mexico's super hyper violent, and going back to the desensitization that you're talking about, right? And I go,
yeah, I mean, look at the last elections they had. They had, somewhat, I think, more than 20.
It was 37
candidates
total, I think it was. Yeah.
Just murdered.
People
right?
of it was
like,
people
wow.
of interest. No, it was nuts on the local levels. It was people of interest to run, potential candidates and actual candidates. None for the sitting presidency, though. So that was the big misinformation there, is that it wasn't, any of them were not for the presidential candidacy. And the
right, they were just for like the local governments.
Exactly.
Where, some of those cartels, or they want control of the local areas so that they can continue to do what they do unimpeded.
Exactly. Like we said, I said earlier, I should say, it's the local level that actually messes with your day-to-day living until things like this happen, where you have an assassination attempt on, the former president, Donald Trump. You have the left and the right going hyper-politicized in each direction. And we're not taking a beat on just going, hey, to clarify the radicalized conspiracies on both ends. And I love them because that's a good energy. I think, digging into things is a positive thing, asking the hard questions, right? And to kind of refocus it on that. If you were, let's say, the people in this situation, you're on that rooftop and you see the shot, because this was another situation I heard. You see the shot and you have to confirm before you take a shot. What would that be in general? Not necessarily give any kind of, specific stuff like, policy or protocol, but there's reports that they did call it in. They had them in their sites, and that they were told not to take the shot. And then the shots were read out, and then the shots were taken. What would be the delay for that reason, or at all?
Honestly, there's two thoughts there. If the reports are correct that they saw the individual, they requested permission to fire, they were told to hold on. It's odd to me, because from my perspective, from my understanding, and from the people I've talked to, those buildings, there's no reason for anybody to be on that rooftop at all. So, as the snipers who are up on that roof, and you see somebody up on top of the roof, I mean, your level of engagement criteria has really shrunk, rather than, being 100% certain that they are a threat. You're basically like, they shouldn't be up there. And now it looks like they, it appears they have a rifle. You're well within your shoot criteria. So that to me, like, kind of throws that doubt in there that they had, that they requested permission to fire and were told to hold on.
Yeah, so the likelihood goes.
The case.
Okay, I see. Because that's just one of the reports that are coming out.
Yeah, but if you watch the video also, that shot rings out, and the snipers kind of bob their head a little bit.
They did so much
into the scope. And that's going to happen.
And that's human reaction. I mean, they were it was snapping into their direction. So I mean, I don't know anybody else who wouldn't have that reaction. Let's be honest.
After the first one, you're kind of like, okay, get into the fight. But when that first one, and you're not expecting it to happen, it's instantly like an immediate response. You kind of just duck your head. But they were into the scope immediately, neutralized the target very, very quickly. So, I mean, and let's go back to the fact that, you were talking about how the Secret Service kind of flinched at first also, but immediately, within a second, on top of the president, shielding him with their bodies. I mean, they had no regard for their own life. They knew that he was the target and jumped on top of him
And then the extra guys came in and everything. You get to learn a lot about what happened that day through that hot mic. And I love it because, like what you're saying, I have to be the devil's advocate, of course, and ask the hard, why did these people flinch? Like, let's be honest, guy. Like, no matter who the fuck you are, as things are going snappy, whip it, crackies next to you, you're going to fucking flinch too. And then to throw it on, what is the normal response time, right? It's impossible. It's impossible to say how quick these people reacted because, again, there were incoming rounds. They snapped a scope, right? There was incoming rounds. They flinched, and then they threw their bodies on top of Donald Trump, right? And then on top of it, you have people bringing up other things. Conspiracy, again, love to talk about it. People in the background, right? They're saying there's no way these were real bullets because all these people in the background were standing up. Right? The people in the glasses, this lady with the phone. And I'm like, hold on, let's go piece by piece again, right? The precision necessary that we needed to talk about here, right, today is almost no way. There's no way in hell. Let's just be honest, okay? The delay on what we said, that wasn't even a delay, right? You already confirmed that no matter what, hey, popping back on scope, that is actual genuine response time that people train for and was very good. The last thing.
Well, and you have to take into account, we don't know, when he got into the optic, we're not sure if he was scanning those far targets. His optic may have been zoomed in way far and would have had to maybe make an adjustment real quick to take that close in shot. So we don't know if maybe that was the cause for the delay as well. But
it's not a rational delay.
That delay was a fraction of a second.
Yeah, like what my point was to that is exactly what you're saying, a fraction of a second. Which, yes, okay, like my old coach, in wrestling taught me, dude, 3 minutes in anything, it feels like a lifetime. Okay, 6 minutes in total in a wrestling match. You got two 2-minute, or was it 3 2-minute rounds, whatever it was, right? It feels like an eternity. Okay, those last seconds in a wrestling match, Jesus, man, they feel like an eternity. Trying to get your time down on a run, even in near the 4s, like these athletes do, these competitive shooters, right? Fractions of a second are very huge. So that's why I really want to move to this next question for you. Getting the many shots off within that time period is the next biggest window of discussion, I feel. How confident does a person need to be to take the shot, one, and two, have the ability to keep shooting at that point? Is this something that, because here's the conversational point, right? That this individual was highly trained, or is this one of those that an idiot was super confident and kind of got things right? What are your feelings on that?
Well, I mean, anybody can pull a trigger. I mean, that's just like you can Google. You can Google on, you can find a video on YouTube of an orangutan with an AK-47 and he's pulling the trigger. It doesn't take a lot of skill to do that. So, but what we can refer to is the fact that, he did try out for his high school rifle team. He didn't make the team. He never came back out after his junior year, apparently, after being, told he didn't make the team. But we do know that he had, it's been confirmed that he did have a membership at the local rifle club, where, at the range there, and he did come in and practice and do some things. So, maybe he wasn't highly trained, but he had some skill, especially, being able to make the shots that he did relatively close, because you see, like I said, we don't know if it was the first or second round. I believe it was the second round that actually struck his ear, but the first one that goes whizzing by kind of causes him to flinch a little bit. And then you hear the second one, he touches his ear and there's blood. So, I mean, obviously they were all pretty close. So he had some skill. He'd practiced. And, at that distance, you don't necessarily have to be, the greatest marksman in the world to hit a man-sized target.
Exactly. Wow. I'm just like, again, taken aback by it because that's the main conversation point, is that this person was blah, 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 3 later agency, blah, 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 MK Ultra, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, come on. This shit is on repeat. Like, come up with some more interesting stuff, right? Like some kind of weird thing was activated and, whatever. But
Yeah.
no, it's
I
the
mean,
same thing over and over again. But no, you bring up the valid point.
even in my small town, I went out, I went out for a beer and we were kind of talking about it. And obviously it was the talk of everything that night. But yeah, I mean, I heard everything from he was a Chinese nationalist
Oh my God.
to he was an FBI plant. So it was like, okay, what is going on here, guys? Everybody has to just back up. Let's wait for the facts to come out because in this day and age, the information and the data dump that you receive is overload, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have everything from videos to people posting to, just those people who want to incite things. They're like, oh, I knew him and we went to school and he was crazy. And, we haven't even started to discuss the fact that they found devices in his vehicle, which are reported to be bombs, but, it hasn't been confirmed. Nobody has actually said that these were bombs. They were just devices that were neutralized by the bomb squad from what I've been able to
explosive devices, I think the term was. Yeah.
So,
but see, it just
what
all
was the huge plan there?
Yeah, exactly. Like, was this supposed to be a GTA moment? Like, don't get me wrong. I think everybody's had those inner thoughts and those little whispers, but I go, no, come on, guy. Like, where is the see, this is my naive brain speaking. I was going to say continuity of reporting and journalistic integrity. And I go, see, you said something that's not really relative anymore. Integrity. And, in the space, that's the reason why I was excited to get on the phone with you and discuss these things, because as honest as I want to be, right, I can't stomach the fact that this was as big of a security failure as it would feel. Then you have to look and break it down. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, as shocking as it is, when you start to pull back the layers of truth, right? Okay, so he's not the current president, all right? That's one layer. It was local PD's area or something that, well, here we are. Here's the other problem. There's 3 different security elements that are supposed to communicate together. Okay, that's another layer. Complacency a bit, maybe, right? That's another layer. And then you have the suspicion of how trained, high, or low. But looking at the efficacy of the shots, I think there was even a shot, if you pay attention, to the rear of the rear right area next to like one of those tractors or forklifts, and I think he was holding up the speaker array. I think it got hit because you can see just something spraying out all over, and then the forklift lowering, and I'm like, what a hectic fucking scene. Okay, because if that's what I think it was, and that was one of the rounds hitting or, causing that much of a distraction, on top of it, you have more incoming rounds. The delay that is perceived, of course, by the media coverage of, how long it took to engage the target and eliminate the attempted assassinator? That guy, that fucking guy, the one canoed on the roof. Yeah. It's really the assassin. There you go. Wow. I was just complicating my life for no reason. Shit.
Yeah. You made that a lot harder than it needed to be.
Yeah. That's what I typically do. My wife says that that's the one thing I'm very good at.
Sometimes we're our own worst enemies, but
it's so true.
If you go, it's funny because CNN has a visual timeline now posted on their website. And you can actually, they break it down by seconds of what is going on and how things went. And it shows, at 6:05 and 12 seconds, he starts addressing the crowd, right? And it shows a video, and then it goes to the point where at 6:11, Trump pauses, 6:11 and 33 seconds, he pauses, and shots ring out. And then you go down a little bit more, and it's literally 6:11 and 35. So from at 6:11:34 when he touches his ear to 6:11:35 when the Secret Service literally tackle him. So there was 1 second from the time he touches his ear.
That's insanity. See, and breaking it down that way is so important because you yourself, Bane, you said it I mean, you back down on it. You are a subject matter expert in everything behind a rifle and with a rifle, right? I think the caveat is, yeah, but not Secret Service, right? Of course, but
Yeah, no,
it's
absolutely not law enforcement, not Secret Service at all. So I can't necessarily speak to what their exact SOPs are or anything like that. But I have been, part of protection details and different things like that, especially in the military while overseas, doing, you know, high value targets, basically protecting, generals in country and different things like that. So.
Yeah, and that's what I really want to touch base on real quick right there. You're very humble, man. I very much appreciate that. But you even have experience in the security element, right? This type of gap, what would have to go wrong for it to occur the way it did?
Well, I mean, there would have to be, just, I wouldn't say it had to go wrong. I would just say it had to be like the perfect storm of maybe they had, roving security on that perimeter where they were just walking those areas. And, in the time it took one of the local law enforcement officers to move from one building to the next, he had enough time to, get into position and climb up on that building. But, for the most part, in most situations, from what we're hearing, and this is even from, Mayorkas, who's the director of Homeland Security, he even stated that there should have been somebody on that building because it had a direct line of sight to the president. So, or to the former president, I should say, which is, in my eyes and my understanding, yeah, I mean, at that distance, with a direct line of sight, that building should have been completely locked down, or at least had a local law enforcement agent, stationed on that roof.
Yeah, because there are photos of a ladder, and I'm not the best at this, but I've seen so many documentaries. I've worked with enough people where, and even you yourself are saying right here on air, like, hey, it is the perfect storm. Okay. Like some things had to go just so perfect and so right. And then also, little bit wrong, but like I brought up earlier, for a lot of the listeners that maybe don't know, like in the military alone, how difficult it is to communicate from one branch to the next at times. It's really interesting. I've worked with,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's insane. So what
Well,
I'm saying,
and I mean, you have to realize,
Yeah.
Within your own team, it's relatively easy. And even then you can step on each other while you're communicating over radio communications, right? You could be saying something and then your team leader or your assistant team leader steps in and says something. I've had it happen multiple times, but it's still relatively easy to communicate quickly and efficiently within your own team. But now you add outside, entities such as, the Secret Service can communicate within the Secret Service very rapidly. But then to communicate, they may have a complete set of different channels and radio sets for the law enforcement that is doing the, that outer perimeter. And so now you're asking them to basically, even if they do communicate in a really quick fashion, it has to be relayed back to that Secret Service command center or the team and then disseminated to all the individuals.
Yeah. Like that's the worst is you start playing that telephone line, whatever that game was, back in the day where you're whispering in each other's ear. It looks like we saw it in real time a bit, but and you know what? It's amazing that you bring up, the actual facts of how fast these people and gentlemen engaged in that counter snipering shot, because like you pointed out, it's such a fraction of a moment in time that it's it's critical, of course, of us all, outsiders looking in, but having your experiences on one, incoming fire, returning fire, and training in this capacity of being an expert rifleman, a sniper, having that expertise in competition as well. it's one of those that if we don't have these conversations with persons and gentlemen like you, right, it's almost impossible to gain the contrasting knowledge necessary to discern what is possible and plausible here, right? And that's why I'm so excited. I'm excited for this episode. I'm excited to get to know you a lot better and a lot more. I'd really like, for us to reconnect and continue this conversation, but also to continue the conversation about yourself, your service to our country, and your experiences and your transition, as well as what you have going on in life besides, coming on and having a great conversation with me on this wonderful Monday. But I really want to, we got to hop off and get some more things going, but I really want to give you an opportunity to kind of give us some shout outs. How do we connect with you, JR, and how do we assist you in what you got going on in your life?
Oh, well, you know what? There's really not a lot going on in my life as far as how you guys can assist me. I'm doing well. Everything's been great. And,
we'd love to hear that. That's the best.
I'm a Marine who got out and is now in the blue collar sector. So there's, I don't have a lot of social media or anything like that. So I would just say, honestly, just, do me a favor and do your own research, kind of take the facts in first, kind of dig into something before you just jump to conclusions. Obviously, there's a lot of, people quarterbacking from the sidelines, and you kind of have to sit back, take everything in, and then make your own conclusion once you get all the details.
Awesome. Completely agree with you. Now, one last thing I really wanted to hit about the trajectory before we get going, guys. I know the trajectory of this round and the last moment of movement. Okay. What would you say the likelihood of that occurring is, giving any kind of relative, conspiracy or not? What would the likelihood of making that shot at that distance be, period?
Yeah, honestly, without knowing what the wind conditions were there or anything like that, but saying everything in a perfect environment, in a vacuum, basically, at that distance, I'd put that shot percentage at about less than 5%.
Wow. Okay. Less than 5%. And that, okay, so less than 5%. Okay. That is insane, because that really, what's the word I want to put puts to rest any kind of question that this was intentional or not. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would take those, I would gamble on those odds on a football game, but not with my own life. So
exactly. Yeah. See, and that's the thing I really love about what's going on in this conversation, because all we're doing is saying straight up facts. We're discussing what people are saying, but we're not anchoring to nothing. I love take a step back and look at it analytically, be pragmatic. But the truth of the fact is, I'm a betting man, and you sounded like a betting man right there. Right? I'm pretty sure Donald Trump's a betting man, and he would never bet on any man taking that shot, period. I mean, even with your expertise, I wouldn't pay you. I would never, no matter how many votes.
Telling you, I wouldn't take that shot on myself.
Yeah. So you looking at you doing that to I would not. Exactly. I don't see how it's plausible. So I'm glad to put that to rest here today, at least. One of the very things that are going to be jumping up. JR, thank you so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and wrap the show here. So if you have any other comments, concerns, save rounds, anything you'd like to share.
No, just I appreciate you having me on and taking the time to talk. It's been a pleasure, Joey.
Internet, hello. Assistant Irish number 4, and then he's a fin number represent Irish number 6, because he has me question.